Thank you very much, and thank you to all the organizers of the Fabringen, and my heartfelt thanks for including me in today's mega event. Unlike the majority of speakers today, I was never zeiche to see or meet the Rebbe. Simply speaking, my family, though clearly Jewish and proud of it, was not observant. So unfortunately, I can't share personal anecdotes about my experiences in 770 with the Rebbe like many of the speakers that have come before me. Nevertheless, some of the biggest influences in my life have been the Rebbe's shluchim and Chassidim, who propelled me in the direction that I've now followed for many years. Moreover, Baruch Hashem, I feel very fortunate to now consider myself among their ranks. And I feel very strongly that it's my role to do as they do, namely to do everything that I can do to influence others and to hasten the revelation of Mashiach Tzidkenu. So I'd like to share with you some of those life-changing and affirming influences that I received and some of my experiences along the way. As I mentioned, I did not grow up in a religious household. In fact, I had never met Chabad before until I was in graduate school. And through a series of incredible hashgacha pratis, I found myself at a Pesach Seder at Chabad of New York University with Rabbi Dov Yona and Rebbetzin Sarah Korn. Having never met or heard of Chabad, despite growing up in Montreal and living for several years in Manhattan, I know what rock was I living under. I found myself at this Chabad house Seder that would set the course of the rest of my life. This Seder was nothing like I had ever experienced. It was not this long, drawn-out affair. It was a very to-the-point, very focused on action-based mitzvahs, made Kiddush, read the Haggadah, one by one going through the Magid until everyone was eating matzah. And while everyone was eating a delicious brisket, Rabbi Korn told a well-known parable, probably one that everyone here has heard many times before. The one about the man searching for diamonds, but coming home with chicken fat, schmaltz, which now in retrospect seems very, very apropos to a Pesach Seder. Little did I know at the time. And at the end of this well-known parable, Rabbi Korn spoke of the Rebbe's emphasis on the value of every single mitzvah and how every mitzvah that a person does from every single person counts and has tremendous value. And what's amazing is, despite having Jewish day school experiences in my youth, I never heard or understood something like that before. I was always led to believe that Yiddishkeit, Torah and mitzvahs, was an all or nothing prospect. If you weren't willing to commit to the whole thing, then every mitzvah doesn't matter. But rather, this life-changing idea that every single mitzvah has value, this was something brand new. And little did I know, I was learning one of the Rebbe's most fundamental principles that we seek to influence others with today. So right then and there, at the urging of Rabbi Korn, I made a achlata to start putting on tefillin after Pesach. My Zaydi Alav Shalom had purchased for me a pair of tefillin when I turned 13. And after that one time putting on the tefillin, I had never put it on since. In the years that followed this encounter, I've used this approach of the value of one mitzvah and every mitzvah being a diamond to the Aibeshter countless times with my students at Boston University. I was just speaking with one of them who, despite having come from a background where he was performing Torah mitzvahs before college, he had taken a moment to step back from things like tefillin and things of that nature. Anyways, Baruch Hashem, he continues to put on tefillin to this very day, and he just got engaged to a wonderful Jewish girl. And Mitzvah Hashem, I'll be doing their chasana in the coming months. Mitzvah gereres mitzvah. It wasn't long before tefillin turned into another mitzvah and another mitzvah. And after adding several more mitzvahs, I soon found myself at the Hadar HaTorah summer yeshivacation. Like many Balei Tshuva, I started questioning, what am I going to do with my life? Here I was in the middle of a PhD in theoretical chemistry. And I'm discovering this passion and this love for Yiddishkeit. So what should I do? Finish my PhD or come to yeshiva? So I remember vividly one afternoon during that yeshiva vacation, I was zeichet to sit down with Rabbi Goldberg, the Rosh Yeshiva, and sitting there in his gazebo up in upstate New York, he told me two stories that had a tremendous impact on me. One was the story of Dr. Yitzchak Bloch, aleph shalom, and the other one was the story of Dr. Yaakov Chanoka, aleph shalom. Both of whom, as most of you may know, were given explicit instructions by the Rebbe to finish their degrees and to excel in their respective fields. That their influence on others would come through their incredible achievements and them being a dugma chai in the rest of the world. Little did I know how apropos these stories would turn out to be. See, now I live in Boston, the city where Dr. Hanoka lived for many years, and I'm a professor at Boston University, a professor like Dr. Bloch. But Rabbi Goldberg didn't end his advice there. He added one caveat. He said to me that if I'll daven more and learn at length, then for sure, he said, Vaday shetatzliach, for sure you'll be successful. Though I'd already been studying, learning Chumash, Halacha, basics of Yadus, all the books that Rabbi Korn had given me and piled onto me to continue to start learning, my love affair with Chabad Chassidus started at this very important moment, my time at Hadar Torah. My Ivris was not strong, and my Yiddish was non-existent. And so when I returned to New York University, where I was studying for my PhD, I started learning Likutei Sichos in English. There was a copy of Likutei Sichos in English on the Chabad House shelves, and I started to learn. Moreover, following the Rebbe's instruction imparted by Rabbi Korn, that if you know aleph, you should teach aleph, I made chavrusas to start learning sichos with other students at NYU. Honestly, I can't say that I actually knew aleph, but the Rebbe says to start learning with people. Okay, I'm going to start learning with people. So a couple of months go by, and we reach Parshas Bereshis, and I received a tremendous shock. As we learned this sikha from Chelik Aleph, I discovered something incredible. In addition to the fact, the incredible sikha of Chelik Aleph, what I discovered through my years in college in upstate New York and all of my time at NYU, during which I did absolutely nothing that anyone would ever describe as overtly Jewish. From time to time, people would ask me, hey, you're a Jewish guy. Why don't you share with us a little bit about Yiddishkeit? Tell us something Jewish that you know. Okay, what did I know? I didn't grow up from such a background. But I remembered something I learned in elementary school. I remembered a little varter that I learned from an elementary school teacher in the Talmud Torah in Montreal. The teacher said that Parshas Bereshis has an incredible potential to influence the whole year. Why? Because we learned that Bereshis Bara Elikim is ever present. At every moment, at every moment in time, Hashem is constantly reinvesting himself into the creation of the universe. And that imparts upon us a tremendous impact. And I'm sitting here, I'm learning this Sikha and Likutei Sichos, and there it was. The one thing, time and time again, when somebody would ask me to chazer a little bit about Judaism, the one thing I remembered from all of my Jewish experiences growing up, it was the first Sikha in Likutei Sichos. That teacher, it turns out, though I didn't know it at the time, was a Lubavitcher, Rabbi Stiefel. And the year was Tafshin Nun Beis. And this one little bit of Chassidus was all that I remembered and all that had an impact on me in all of those many intervening years before I would come to the Seder at Chabad at NYU. Chassidus has a huge influence on a person, even if they don't know it. Many years later, after my wife and I were married, I remember we were in Eretz HaKodesh, and there was a certain person from my youth that I visited there. He remembered me when I was this young fry boy, and now here I am with a beard and a hat, and he was questioning me about why it is that I decided to start being Shemitah mitzvahs, and questioning. And finally I just said to him, I learned Chabad Chassidus, and it opened my heart. And the man took me upstairs to his private study. This was not a Lubavitch man. And he said, I want to show you something. And in the back of his closet, in the back of his locked closet, in his locked office study, was a set of Likutei Sichos. He says, it also has an impact on me. Learning Chassidus with somebody does have a tremendous transformation on who they are. These influences, both Rabbi Korn and my influence with Rabbi Goldberg at Hazar Torah and with Rabbi Stiefel in my youth, shaped me, my career, and how I've lived ever since. I'd like to share with you some of the experiences I've had as a college professor. Baruch Hashem, being in a university, I'm blessed with the opportunity to influence many people. So let me share a few stories with you. I remember when I first came to Boston University for a job interview, and the story of that's similarly miraculous to how I ended up at that first Seder, but that's a story for perhaps another time. I came to Boston early. This is the day before you had GPSs on your cell phone, and I had heard about how the traffic and the directions in Boston were so great. We came early, and I went around the city, and I met certain Jewish people in the day before the interview. And I remember one of them, a certain rabbi, he looked at me and he said, "You're not planning to go looking like that to your job interview." So I'm looking around. I said to him, "What do you mean looking like that? It's not hair extensions. It's not a clip-on. This is just who I am." It's like, "No, with your beard and your jacket." I said to him, with all due respect, this is how I go. This is how I look. This is who I am. And I'm not going to change who I am for a job interview. Because a person has to be true to themselves. A person, I remember learning the story that Rebbe says in Fabringen. He brings the story of that's brought down the Gemara Yuma about Shimon HaTzadik, who wore his big day kahuna to go out to greet Alexander at the gates of Yerushalayim. And when Alexander saw Shimon HaTzadik and he was wearing his big day kahuna, he jumped down and he prostrated himself in front of the Kohen Gadol. And we all know the famous story. And the reality is that when a Jew walks with his big day kahuna, then everyone bows down to them. Everyone realizes who they are and has respect for them. So I went, and I continue to go. This is how I dress. I remember my first day in the university. I hadn't yet been on the faculty roster, so I was listed as staff. Professor staff is the most enigmatic person at any university. Anyway, so I walk into my first class, and I'm a complete anonymous person. So this class of 200 students, I walk in with my hat, my jacket, my beard, my briefcase. I walk to the front of the class, and I say to them, "Good afternoon, welcome to RN 375, Introduction to Mystical Jewish Thought." Everyone lost their minds, like, "Professor, I think you're in the wrong room." I said, "Oh, what's supposed to be here?" They said, "Oh, this is chemistry." I said, "I could teach you that too." Anyways, Baruch Hashem, I remember in that job interview, one of the things I was doing and preparing, obviously, learning Chassidus, talking to my mashpiyim, there was a letter in Igris that I was learning at the time, and the Rebbe was talking to an educator and about their role in education, reminding them that an educator has incredible influence and responsibility to impact the students as well as everyone at their entire institution. And so I remember sitting there in one of the interviews, and one of these professors was asking me these questions, and they seemed out of left field. Is it possible for a Jew to be a professional? Is it possible? I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm a professional. What are you asking from me? I got the sense also that this professor happened to himself be Jewish. So after a few minutes trying to figure out what he was trying to get after, he told me, "My nephew's at a yeshiva in Morristown." I'm like, "Oh." He says, and he's not really in the world, the mushroom from Belt. And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. He's going to be fine. He's going to get a job. He's going to get married. Everything's going to be great." His nephew was living, from what I understand, his nephew was living in France, married, and he was coming to visit him. And one time, this professor comes to my office. He and I became very close. Mitzvah and whatever, we became very close. And I remember one time he comes to my office, he says, Binyomin, I'm just trying to figure this out. My nephew's coming to visit me from Europe, but I don't get it. He says that he has to stop off first in New York because he has to go to a Beis HaChaim in Queens. Is that normal that he's stopping off in Queens on his way to? I said it would be abnormal if he did not stop off in Queens on his way to Boston. Okay. Baruch Hashem, the influence a person can have not on just on their students, but on the people around them. When I left the job interview, honestly, I had felt a little bit discouraged. I thought, okay, between not shaking hands and talking to, and all the scheduling concerns, they originally wanted to interview me on a Friday afternoon. I had to tell them Shabbos, I'm not coming on Erev Shabbos to have an interview. Baruch Hashem, I got the job, and I've had an opportunity ever since to continue to help and influence many students, sometimes without even realizing it. In Tesvav, the Rebbe shared a story that I think is pretty famous. I think Jem put it out. It was also in a book. Okay, the Rebbe shared a story. Said in a small town in America, a Jew looked out his window and saw a yeshiva bacher that was passing by on the street. And this bearded younger man with a yarmulke and tzitzis caught his attention. And he thought to himself, where is this young man from? Poland, Ukraine, he asked. And he was told, no, he's from Boston. And the man lost his mind. He said, a Bostonian with a beard, with payas, tzitzis. The yeshiva student walking by said that Rebbe was completely unaware of the impact that he had on this man in the window, who was inspired by seeing him to explore his heritage. And that man started keeping kosher and little by little do more and more mitzvahs. And to this day, the student has no idea what he accomplished. And the Rebbe concluded, in the course of your mission, our mission, you will teach the Jews whom you meet, but beyond that, you may achieve wonders by your mere presence alone. Fortunately, I've heard some stories. Students have come and shared with me even years later. Several years ago, I remember a student came up to me on their graduation day from Boston University, a student that never spoke to me. Sometimes I teach large classes, hundreds of students, and while I try to get to know my students, not all of them am I able to meet and get to know all of them. And a student came and spoke to me. He says, I never spoke to you before. You definitely don't know me. I want to share a story with you. See, he had come from an observant background, and he came to college, and he started having sfeikus emunah. He started doubting himself, and he started thinking to himself, how is it that I'm going to become a professional? He wanted to be a surgeon or a chassidus. He wanted to be some sort of doctor or professional. And he said, I've come to the conclusion I cannot accomplish that while also continuing to be shomer Torah mitzvahs for whatever reason. And I woke up on the day of my first day of classes, and I turned to Hashem. It's amazing how all of these stories, by the way, involve the guy turning to Hashem. The guy who maybe doesn't believe anymore turns to Hashem, and he says, Hashem, I want you to know, up until now, I've never eaten shreifus. Up until now, I've always kept Shabbos. But starting today, at lunchtime, I'm going to go and eat not kosher food. You have until lunch to send me an overt sign that I should keep Torah and mitzvahs and I should not start eating treif. And he said, and with that, I walked into my first college lecture, general chemistry, and who's standing at the front of the room is you, Professor Abrams. And I looked to Hashem and I said, well played, God, well played. I get the message. It's possible to be a proud, observant Jew and also be a professional. And he kept Shabbos and he kept kosher. I have several stories like this. I remember one time a student sent me a photo, a screenshot that they had taken from Facebook. I had been driving down Commonwealth Avenue, the main street in campus, driving my moped. When I'm driving a moped, I wear a regular black helmet. I looked for one with a brim, but they don't make helmets with brims. And I'm driving down Commonwealth Avenue on my moped, and my beard is flying in the wind. And someone snaps a photo of this, and they put it on the Facebook page. And the student comments, I'm so excited to be going to Boston University. Where else are you going to see an Amish riding on a moped? And so the next commenter says, I don't think the Amish are allowed to ride on mopeds. So the third guy says, stop telling the Amish what they aren't allowed to do. And the fourth one said, he's not Amish, he's a Hasidic Jew, and he's our chemistry professor. And I never knew that this happened until someone sent me the photo. Baruch Hashem, over the years, I've been zeicha to send many students to the Chabad house. Rabbi Posner and Mrs. Posner do an amazing job in Kenmore Square. I remember one Shabbos, I sat bringing with a guy, with Rabbi Posner, till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was Shabbos. And this was a student that was just visiting. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, he said, I have to go. I have a big dancing competition tomorrow. I said, forget dancing, stay here. And he said to me, no, you don't understand, Rabbi. I'm a big dancer. I said, what you don't understand is that I used to be a dancer too, I told him. I proved it to him. I said, now you have to stay. In the end, he didn't stay. But 2 years later, he sent me an email, a picture of him with a hat and a Gemara and a wife. And he said, that Shabbos changed my life. When I saw that this is what is truth, I decided to be more connected and more invested in my Yiddishkeit. Recently, I received an email from a student asking to be excused from class on Yom Tov. Who are they writing to? What the student didn't realize is that every year I meet with all the Jewish students who are interested in meeting and explain to them how to talk to professors about Yom Tov and getting off from classes. And I drafted this email that students could customize to send to their professor. Dear Professor so-and-so, my name is this. And this is Yom Tov, I can't Isser Malacha, yada, yada, yada. And they changed the dates and they sent to the professor. This is the first time I had ever received my own email from a person I had never met before. My students were influencing other students. And now they were sending me an email being proud to be Jewish, not coming to class. Of course, I wasn't going to be there either. So of course, not a problem. One of the Rebbe's goals is that we should all be educators in the most positive sense, and that we should all be leaders. This is the message that guides and motivates me every day. Whether it's jumping in a van with a group of students on Mitzvah Shabbos Kodesh to go to Slichas in 770, which Baruch Hashem we do every year, or going to the Chabad on campus Shabbaton, taking groups to the aisle. Okay, they usually take me and I bring along the way, or learning with students in my office. As I sat in my house this Shabbos afternoon with a former student and his young son, I thought about how privileged I feel to be able to work with so many Jewish students and to have the opportunity to influence their lives. Like so many people, like so many Chassidim and Shluchim have influenced me. And so I want to take a moment to remind everyone that this all started with a single mitzvah, me putting on tefillin. So I would be remiss if I didn't encourage everyone to go to onemitzvah.org/sign up and to sign up to make a achlota for one mitzvah. And if you're already doing a mitzvah, so send that email to another person. And shliach is shliach, and every single person should add a mitzvah, because mitzvah gerer is mitzvah and schar mitzvah, and every single one of these, there's no end in it, because it creates another person who will go out there and inspire others. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to bring with all of you today. And now it's time for me to go put on tefillin, because Baruch Hashem, I haven't missed a single day since that first encounter with Chabad, and I don't plan on starting anytime soon.